we'll take number 10, approval of the minutes of August 8th, 2022 board meeting. Do I have a motion? Mr. Hogan, that was a hand up. Look there. Yeah, I got him.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of the August 8, 2022 board meeting.
Is there a second? Ms. Moore seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none. And that passes 7-0. So public participation, and we look forward to hearing from anyone if there's anyone that's turned in a card.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. We have one speaker tonight. Aaron Long Bergeson of Chapin is here to speak about the foreign exchange program.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Erin Long Bergeson, and I live on Amos Ferry Road in Chapin. And I was coming up here to ask that each of you consider approving the reinstatement of the admission of foreign exchange students. We have an opportunity to host 2 exchange students from Spain and Italy. And when we were trying to get them enrolled in schools, we got a phone call that District 5 had not reinstated that program. And so we started working to get that obviously reinstated at that time. And when somebody asked me, like, why do you want to get them reinstated? And I said, well, we're always talking about diversity. How can you get more diverse than kids from a different country who speak a different language, who have a completely different culture? So I feel like it adds a lot to the students. It adds a lot to these 2 individual students' lives as well, obviously. But it adds to all of our community's lives and to the students and teachers who come in contact with them as well. So I don't feel like there's any way that this just isn't a great reinstatement to our district and what our community stands for. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Great, we thank you. Was that's our only speaker? Well, after the fact, I didn't read that you had 3 minutes, but you did really good. And you were very positive, and we appreciate you. Okay, number 12, the action agenda as necessary and appropriate of matters discussed in executive session. So,
2 motions. Okay, yeah, the first one is I make the motion that we approve the selected employment items shown under Exhibit A for action.
okay, is there a second? Ms. Moore seconds. Any questions or statements? Seeing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, and that's 7 and no. And then we need the one on professional development. E, you got that?
Yeah. For item 3E, I move that the board approves the attached contracts with Keshnik and Associates to work with all schools in District 5, as well as additional sessions with Seven Oaks Elementary School on development.
Is there a second? I see a second from Ms. Hines. Any questions since you made that? Do we need any explanation from Ms. Miller? We know the teachers really liked this program. It specializes in teacher development. So we're good. All those in favor? And that is 7-0, so that passes. And that was it for executive session. So now we have number 13, approval to reinstate board policy Jfabb, admission of foreign exchange students, Exhibit D. Do I have a motion? Ms. Hines.
I move that we reinstate the foreign exchange policy Jfabb, effective for the,
JFABB.
Okay, I'm looking at the recommendation.
JFABB.
Jfabb,
You got it?
effective for the 2022-2023 school year.
Is there a second? Mr. Hogan seconds. And I think we all know the value of that program. And it really got, just so the public knows, with COVID is the only reason it was suspended. Not that we ever did not believe in it and know it was really good. But thank you for being an advocate for getting that back reinstated. So all those in favor? And that is 7-0. Thank you. So discussion. 14, discussion and first reading proposed revisions to board policy GCC, professional staff leaves and absences, as seen at Exhibit E. So we will welcome Dr. Turner, and you can lead us through this.
Chair Hammond, board members, and Dr. Ross, the next 3 items have the same background reason for needing to be revised. The revisions will remove sections that reference the Terry policy. As you all may be aware, Terry was repealed in 2012. And that repeal took effect on July 1st, 2018. So these revisions will remove those sections that refer to Terry. So the administration recommends that the board approve the first reading of the proposed revisions to Board Policy GCC, Professional Staff Leave and Absences, which removes the sections that reference the Terry program.
Okay. Any questions about that? All right. So I have a motion on that for first reading. Ms., you have it, Ms. Huddle?
I move that we approve first reading of proposed revisions to Board Policy GCC, Professional Staff Leaves and Absences per Exhibit E.
Is there a second? Ms. Hines seconds. And I think you explained it very well, unless anybody else has a question. All those in favor? And that is 7-0 opposed. Number 15, discussion and first reading proposed revisions to Board Policy GDC, support staff contracts and compensation, Exhibit F.
This would be another policy that the revision would be to remove the reference to the Terry program.
Right, that's what I thought. Let's have a motion, and then if there's any questions. Will you do that, Mr. Bubba's?
Yes, I move that, that we give first reading approval to the revisions of Board Policy GDC, support staff contracts and compensation shown in Exhibit F.
There's a second. Ms. Hines seconds. And I think, like you've explained it, we have to remove the Terry part.
Yes.
All those in favor? That is 7-0 opposed. Thank you. You're still there. See, Dr. Turner, we just let you have to come one time. 16, discussion and first reading proposed revision to Board Policy GCB, professional staff contracts and compensation.
That's the last policy that has the section that references Terry. So again, that's the final revision that needs to be made to those three policies to remove the section that references the Terry program.
Gotcha. Ms. Hines?
I move that we give first reading of proposed revision to Board Policy GCB, professional staff contracts and compensation in Exhibit G.
There's a second. Ms. Moore seconds. And I think we all are understanding these are just sort of a cleanup from the getting the Terry part out of each of these. All those in favor? She does. 7. All those opposed? It's okay. It was Dr. Ross's fault. Okay. Before I get to 17, I want to say we are so pleased to have Kathy Mahoney, who's our expert that's going to help us with this one. And I'm going to call Kathy up here. Miss Mahoney up here. She's a smart, bright IRMO graduate. I just, push my IRMO. Discussion and first reading proposed revision to Board Policy GBGBA, Weapons, Exhibit H. I'll take a motion and then we'll let her share that with us. Ms. Hines.
I move that we give first reading of proposed revisions to Board Policy GBGBA, Weapons in Exhibit H.
And there's a second? I see a second, Ms. Huddle. Now, before we ask any questions, would you just lead us off on this and the need of it?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Ross, members of the board. The purpose of the revisions of this policy, Dr. Ross had asked me to work with suggesting amendments to this policy, primarily the focus being to ensure that the district safety officers who are employed, district employees, not law enforcement employees, be authorized to actually carry or possess a firearm on district property. And there are 2 state statutes that you read together that give this permission, but we wanted to be very clear that this is very precise. It applies to safety officers. This is not a district-wide issue. So to get the language clear, the district's current safety officers are very experienced former law enforcement officers who have great experience and background that they bring to the district. And so that's why it's clarified that these are safety officers who are either current or former, and what the proper term is certified Class 1 law enforcement officers, and have either a concealed weapons permit or equivalent credential if they're from another state. So it's very narrowly construed, but the law permits a property, the district is prohibited is prohibited from being on property, you can have an exception. And this is basically the board granting the superintendent the authority to authorize these specific individuals. But it further goes on and says they cannot display, brandish, or threaten others with a firearm. So it'd still be a concealed issue, but they can have it on their person. And there's just a clarification further that statute goes on to say this does not apply to concealed weapons permits that are maintained strictly in glove compartments in cars, et cetera. So it clarifies that distinction. We also went ahead and kind of cleaned up some other areas to not distinguish between weapons and dangerous weapons, because weapons are dangerous. So we just took out any references to modify weapon, and also to broaden the definition of weapon to be consistent with what the state statute says. So hopefully that's not too much confusion.
Yeah, sure. Questions? Anybody, you had one too? All right, well, I'll tell you what.
Go ahead.
I was gonna start that way, but I didn't see both of your hands. Ms. Hines, I'm just gonna go down, everybody may have a question. All right, Mr. Hogan, you had one, and then I'll go to Ms. Scott.
Just for clarification, this does not give authority to anybody that meets the credentials to carry a firearm, correct? It just gives ones that are appointed by the superintendent.
Correct. It only authorizes the superintendent to grant express permission to these safety officers. So he's the only one, you're only designating superintendent, and he's only designating these safety officers. Correct.
Perfect, thank you.
Ms. Gardner.
Yeah, I guess I had kind of a similar question, because in the second paragraph, there's a statement that says, this policy does not apply to a guard, a law enforcement officer, or a member of the armed forces. That doesn't mean that they're allowed those things. That just means that, I'm not sure what that statement means. That means that they are an exception to the rule, or I'd like to understand what that statement means.
Sure. That statement is right in the state law, and basically the state law makes it unlawful for anyone to possess a firearm of any kind, and it gives all the details on school property and other places, public schools, private, other places, publicly owned buildings, technical colleges, and then but then it makes an exception. It doesn't apply to a guard, a law enforcement officer, member of the armed forces, meaning we don't have to give authority for the Richland County Sheriff's Department deputy to come on school grounds with a firearm. So the state law makes that exception. So this is just tracking the language right in the state law.
But would it not allow anybody who's a member of the armed forces to come on campus and do what they felt was needed? I guess that's what I'm worried about, is leaving a huge loophole, a misunderstanding. But I just wanted to know if I'm reading it wrong.
So this is a criminal statute, which makes it a penalty to the person. The district still prohibits the possession of firearms around the property. You just won't be charged criminally in the statute, because this statute does not apply to, it's just the wording is a guard, a law enforcement officer, or a member of the armed forces. So it's just tracking that language.
But to me, it says that they're allowed to come on campus with a gun. That's all. I'm just saying, if you read it strictly like it's written, I'm worried that that's what it means. It might need a statement that says, as long as they're employed by the district, or as long as Dr. Ross gives them express permission. I feel like there should be a caveat. The way it's written is very
Yeah, I guess
vague.
it's just, it's a criminal statute that is just clarifying.
But it doesn't say that in that second paragraph, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, it was superseded.
I
Yeah.
still feel like I feel like our state, it should state that, is all I'm saying. I feel like there should be clarification.
So we said consistent with 1623, 420 in two different places. You could add it a third place.
So we've really already said that.
I mean, it
It's
said
It's
it,
just after that, it's not before it. So that's,
Right.
I just, for those of us who aren't lawyers and we don't know the state law, to me, our policy should reflect state law. So, and it could refer to it, but should also say, this is what I'm saying. Not just anybody can walk in who's a member of the armed forces with a
Right.
gun.
right.
I'm layman, I don't know lawyer speak, I don't know what the code is, but if I read this, it looks like that if I'm in the Army, I can bring my gun in when I bring my kid in first grade, so.
Well,
That's what I don't like about it. I agree with you what it probably means, but these policies are supposed to mean, they're supposed to be easy for us to understand, for the public to understand, if it's our policies as a
Well,
board or as a
Ms.
school
Gardner,
district.
let me clarify. Would this not help? In the very next sentence in the next paragraph, that's the code, 1623, 420.
Right.
So that's but I guess what you're saying is people won't know what that code law says.
Or maybe it should be, like, it should come after that, like this policy does not apply to, maybe it could
I
come
got you.
after
Mr.
that.
Hogan, Mr. Hogan.
I agree with Ms. Gardner. I mean, the way it reads to me is that if you're a law enforcement officer, armed forces, member of the armed forces, that you can, and then the next is, the code is, Dr. Ross can give the permission to
So just move the.
safety officers employed by the district who are currently or formerly Class 1 law enforcement officers. I'd feel better if, correct.
Like, in other words, not any change in the wording, but put the wording right after that?
Well, one option maybe that would address that is we could move that sentence to the end of the
The
fourth
last
paragraph.
yes.
That says, it doesn't apply to district employees authorized to carry a concealed weapon. You can just add the sentence there. Because that's really where it comes in. In this statute, regrettably, the board and lawyers and others we have to interpret statutes, and that's its wording, and sometimes you have to take the plain meaning. But I think if we add it at the end of that next paragraph, it's still bringing in the statute, which is honestly why I cited the statute twice, because it is very confusing, and we just kept wanting to just keep referring.
Right.
We're going to comply with the law. We're going to comply with the law. That's the intent of that. But it's
Well,
we'll move that sentence down, and then that way it's read all together in a package that this is all based on the statute.
So if we're really not changing any wording, we don't need a motion to do that.
I
Ms.
still
Hunt.
have a question about it. I don't think it matters where it is. I don't understand. Is it saying that, I'm back with Ms. Gardner, is it saying that a guard law enforcement officer or a member of the armed forces can come on campus?
You still, as a district, prohibit the carrying of firearms on school property. But the statute makes it not a crime for those individuals who do carry it. And you know, it's a very good question.
Could we say, I mean, because I understand, I mean, if there's an emergency, you know, these people should be allowed to.
Yeah, I want
Right.
them to
You know,
come
or if the
save my
governor
child.
says, you know, the National Guard or whatever. So
Right.
could we just change it to say, guard, law enforcement, or a member of the armed forces are allowed in emergency situations or when permitted by law? Maybe that, when permitted by law?
Yeah, I think that by moving the sentence, like in the paragraph that says consistent with, you know, and because I mean that's what the law, that's what it. I mean, it's a good question to ask the legislature what they meant by that exactly, because they've carved out these exceptions.
So are they saying that a law enforcement officer from Saluda can come on property with a gun even though they're not there in an official capacity? Is that allowed?
This statute doesn't go to say what can happen on school grounds. It says what will be charged as a crime on school grounds.
Yeah.
So this is a criminal codes provision. So it's saying when you do this, in other words, you may not be authorized to carry your weapon on school grounds, but we're not going to charge you criminally if you are in
Yeah, I
fact
get
one
it.
of these individuals, if that makes sense.
Let me give like this example. Let's say I am a parent of a child, and I've got to come in here, and I had to come from work, and I have a gun, because I'm a sheriff deputy, and I've come in there to sign, you know, because that's my job and I carry that, I'm not going to be charged of a crime.
You still wouldn't be permitted to do it on school grounds, but you wouldn't be charged with a crime, I think. That's what the point
I
is.
just think it's confusing that it said a policy doesn't apply. So to me, it means they can do it, and it's not against the policy. And I don't think it matters where you put it. It still reads the same way to me.
Okay, well,
I
let's
have a
get
que-
this
I have a
thing
question.
solved. All right, Ms. Hines.
So it's like a good kind of comparison to this to say, if one of our policies is that you can't have tobacco on school grounds, but if you're over the age of 18, you can legally have cigarettes. So if you have cigarettes in your car, you're not going to get, it's not like a criminal violation, but you're breaking district policy by having cigarettes in your car as like, a teacher or as a parent picking up a child. You're not supposed to have cigarettes in your purse when you go pick up your child. Is that right? Is that it's a very,
Well, I want to
Yeah.
solve this. We're going to, how can you make us happy that have a question about this? If you were suggesting just moving that sentence, the next sentence up to there,
You
but
know-
if that doesn't make the board happy, let's have another,
Here's another option.
let's have an option. Thank you.
Here's another option, because this, I mean, you can look at, this statute's going to be looked at a lot more now that we're having to reevaluate this whole issue of
weapons,
I,
yes.
my suggestion, based on this discussion, would be that since the issue is whether it's a criminal offense or not, let's take the sentence out. because then we're not dictating, I mean, it's still a fact they will not be charged criminally. So they're not, law enforcement
okay, so
officers
take the sentence
aren't
out.
looking at our policy, but we're still making it clear we don't permit this. And
Okay.
our only exception is when Dr. Ross designates 3 safety officers.
Okay, I like.
So I
Do you
think
like
that
Ms.
clarifies your
Gardner?
point.
Ms. Gardner, is that good for you?
Yeah, we
So-
can make a
Mr.
motion that
Hogan.
says that, yeah.
Yeah, so you can
That
just
could be-
you can exclude that sentence because it's still in the law, but the law will protect them.
Yeah, so we'll need a motion to amend that to say that. And Ms. Hines, you got?
I move to amend the original motion to remove the sentence, "This policy does not apply to a guard, law enforcement officer, or member of the armed forces."
You second that, Mr. Hogan, okay? And I think we've discussed it to the hilt, okay? So all those in favor of taking that out? And that is 7-0. So we shall go on. Now, you had a question.
Yeah, I have a question. So the SROs work for Richland or Lexington counties, right?
Correct.
So they don't work for the school district.
Right.
True.
Okay, so if an SRO is armed, we don't give permission to do that. That comes from the county sheriff.
Correct. They have legal authority separate
Okay.
from that.
So what we're talking about is other employees that work directly for the school district, such as Mr. Ross, Mr. Cato, and other members of our security staff. Is that what we're talking about?
That's correct. This is very narrowly tied to the safety officers employed by the district, and it goes on and says who are current or former certified Class 1 law enforcement officers, have a concealed weapons permit or equivalent credentials. So it's a very narrow group of, currently you have 3 individuals who have outstanding backgrounds and experience, and this applies to them and no one else.
Okay, so I wanted to know why, why we were talking about this, because, now I understand. Okay, so I was in a little bit in the dark there. But we were talking the other day at a policy meeting, I think, and we were talking about the fact that our security personnel are in charge until the county sheriff or the other state law enforcement people or FBI, whatever, get to the site. And that's the way it is. That's the law, that our folks have to basically stand down and give authority to
They can't arrest.
the other authorities.
Dr. Harris, you'd like to cover? Well, let me first start by saying, as valuable as our 3 safety officers are, they are not currently law enforcement officers. They have the latitude based on the policy that's been discussed tonight to carry concealed, but in theory, yes, that is exactly right. They will address the situation until such time as local law enforcement, be it Richland County and or Lexington County, arrives on scene.
Okay, I just wanted to know how that works, and so I mean, I'm sure they are, they're very well trained, so I'm sure they know exactly at what point to give away command.
Dr. Ross wants to make a point.
And just also in the development of this, we've talked to Chief Mark Hill of SLED to just make sure that he was aware of the process that we were going through. And so he has recommended that the 3 officers, or 3 safety officers in this case, or in this very narrow definition here, receive their qualifications on marksmanship as well as their legals. So we would also have that as our rule. And we also cleared this with our insurance trust as well, to be sure. We just feel that in today's society, what we're dealing with safety, those 3 employees are going to be first to any potential issue. And we want to make sure that they're in a position to not only protect themselves, but protect others. And this would give them that ability to do so.
Good.
I think it's a great suggestion of the policy, though. I think that
Good.
works nicely.
Okay, are we good? We're good. Did we voted on we did the amendment. So I know, that's what I'm saying. We've got the amendment passed as read, and now we vote on the original, okay? All those in favor? And that is 7-0. And Ms. Mahoney, we thank you for all of our questions and helping us getting it solved.
Sure.
Great. Well, we are thankful, Dr. Harris, too. Thank you for all the work on the safety team. We appreciate it, and Dr. Ross. Okay. Y'all want me to look down there? Does Mr. Hogan have
I've
his
got
hands
a
up?
motion I'd like to make, Chairwoman Hammond. I'd like to make that we adjourn the meeting.
I see a second down there from Ms. Hines. Is there any discussion?
We could call the question.
7-0. Y'all are all so nice. I love this board. Aren't they nice?